Hello guys, and welcome to a brand new series of tutorials. Unlike my usual videos who aim at the advanced and more pro-like players, this series will start from scratch. So if you are a brand new player which just finished the basic tutorials and thrown into the game and is able now to use the game after all the basic tutorials, then this is your starting point if you decide to go for destroyers. I will teach you everything, and if you follow my advice, I can almost guarantee you that you will end up at least in the top 10 of the players, if not in the top 1 of the players, depending on your personal skill and reaction time in the end. But I will give you a very good guideline of how you can improve your skills. To kick off with a little introduction, I have been playing this game since release, which is a bit more than 3 years now, and from scratch I focused on destroyers, but I also play some battleships and some cruisers. And this is also my first advice: if you're brand new to the game, you should try out all 3 classes and you should find which class you like best, because every class has its own role. The role of destroyers basically is to spot enemy ships. We have to explain the spotting mechanics at a later point. So basically it means that a ship can only see an enemy ship if it's within their spotting range, or if somebody else has a visual on the enemy ship. And then you have to imagine they communicate via wireless or radio, and you get to know the enemy position. So spotting is an essential part for your team if you're a destroyer. In a cruiser, you're basically hunting destroyers, so this is your strongest enemy, being a destroyer player. And your class you are going to hunt is the battleship class. So basically the game works as a rock, paper, scissors construct, which means destroyer hunt battleships, battleships hunt cruisers, and cruisers hunt destroyers. And then we have some carriers, but they play a minor role. They do some spotting, they do some damage, but they have no real major strategic role. So given you decide to develop your destroyer captains and personal skills and to grind all the destroyer ships, still you should be playing some of the other classes, because it's very important to know what these classes are capable to do, what equipment do they run, what range their equipment does have. For example, what range is the individual ship's sonar. One ship has 3 kilometer sonar, some others have 5.4, so this is a major difference. If you play against these ships, you need to know in the long term all these stats. So you have to learn about these ships, and the best way to learn about this, which cruiser, for example, runs radar, what is the range, what is the duration of the radar, the best thing is you play these ships. But having said that, still you need to decide for a major line you're gonna grind up, and let's say you play the other classes once and you focus to develop your in-game captains on a destroyer basis. So when you're very new, all your captains are level 1, and you have to decide which captain to level up and why. So this video will give you a basic introduction of what are, in my opinion, the most important skills and basic perks for destroyers, and what are the minor perks you don't have to level up immediately. When we talk about the captains, each captain has on the left side 2 slots. Those are the inspirations. That's what we call them. And next to the right of the captain's head, there's one base trait. And this base trait is what can be used at any other captain as an inspiration. But only the base trait can be used as an inspiration. So whenever you level up a captain, you should start to level up the captains which have the most useful base traits for the class you're playing. because you can use them in many different captains as inspirations. So given you have one captain, let's say you have Sims, and this is one of the most important inspirations because it boosts the HP points of Destroyer, and you will use him not only in Destroyers but also in cruisers and sometimes in battleships. So this is the number one captain I recommend you, the number one inspiration I recommend you to level up. Because you need the additional hit points. It's a battleship captain, but you need the base trait to boost the hit points. And just to give you an example, in a higher tier, it gives you 400 HP per tier level. So in a tier 6 game, it's 6 times 400, so 2,400 additional HP. And a tier 6 DD can have, let's say, 14,000. So you get basically almost 20% if you use Sims increase in HP. So this is very valuable. The next tip is that every day when you go to the store, you will find under the tab offers, you will find a daily free crate. And this crate will give you some, let's say, some boosters or some silver, whatever, various small gifts. But don't forget, you will get 365 crates per year if you take this for free every day. So this is the best thing and the thing you should always get every day. Then once a week, if you can afford that and you have 10,500 silver, you should also go to the shop under supplies, and you will have 3 captain crates which you can purchase for silver. So you don't need doubloons, but you can get it for silver. So if you're playing a lot of games, you might sit on a lot of silver, so don't forget to buy the weekly 3 captain crates. So back to Mr. Sims. You have 16 levels. You can level up a captain, and you have 4 legendary levels. There are certain, let's say it's soft, not really caps, but soft levels, which are worth to level up. You shouldn't go them 1, 2, 3, but you should always level up to a certain step. So the first 6 are free of, basically free of charge, you just pay with Captain XP. From level 7, you need the commendations, and you will get commendations from the campaign. You will get commendations from special events, and they will also drop from certain crates. So there are various ways to get them. And especially in the beginning, you need to carefully think how to spend them. After 2 years, you're sitting on tons of them, so you don't have to worry. There's no way to get them back once you invested them, but you can't do any wrong. In the end, most of the captains sooner or later are useful. So don't worry if you invest into a captain and you find out you don't need them this moment because it's a cruiser captain and you want to play DD, for example. One day, I promise you, you're gonna try cruisers more intensively or battleships, and you will be happy that you leveled him up already. So these levels are level 7, you start to use commendations, and with level 11, with rank 11, you unlock the second inspiration. So you should focus on your destroyer commanders to bring them up to level 11 ASAP, because then they can use the second inspiration, which is essential. If you run a destroyer without 2 inspirations, your chances are very low that you have an impact to the battle, and you might die very early because the drawback is just too big. Then from the problem, or the next thing is from 11, the next level is 12, because 12 will open up the third perk, the next level, and then the next level is 14. But for 14, which will open up the fourth perk, the next level, you need the first universal commendations. So my advice is to level up captains to level 12, 14, and then long time, no investment needed. And if you have enough common universals, you can then start to level up one captain to level 16 to unlock the force perk. And if you have the legendary level 4, then you can complete the force perk. But the force perk is not really that essential in the beginning, so don't focus on leveling up, let's say 2-3 captains to 14, but instead take, like, let's say 10 captains to level 11 or 12, that they have a higher base trait, because then you can use their inspirations and inspire various builds. If you want to level up the legendary levels, then you need personal commendations. You get these whenever you open a captain's crate. You get a personal commendation for the captain you find, unless you don't own the captain. So in the beginning, when you don't own all standard captains, every time you open a captain crate, you will get a new captain you don't own yet. Once you have all the captains in your roster, which are available, and I'm not talking about event and special captains, but just the standard captains. Once you have all of them, you start receiving personal commendations with the captains you open. So that means they start to level up the legendary tiers. And once one of your captains reaches legendary level 4, if you open up a crate for this captain, you will get a so-called universal commendation. So that's a blue one instead of a gold. And the blue one can be used with any captain of your choice to level up his legendary level. And here is the trick how to level up. As soon as you can afford it, and I would say this is a couple of months into the game, and you have a captain at legendary tier 3, you need 15 more personal commendations. And if you end up to have, for example, one captain already with 10 personal commendations, so golden ones, try to get the 5 universals, which you may get from campaigns. Save them up and level one captain to legendary 4, so that he is maxed out in legendary. And why would you do that? Because if you have one captain fully maxed out in legendary tier, you can go to the shop, to the captains page, and purchase this very captain for captain XP. You will need 900,000 captain XP to buy this captain. And if you buy this captain, you will be granted a universal commendation instead of a personal. So that way you can farm universal commendations if you have enough captain XP. And that way, one after the other, you will start to level to max out the most important captains which you need, especially the destroyer captains if you focus on destroyers. So this is basically how you level up your captains over the time and where you should focus on. So now let's talk you through the individual nations and captains, and what are the most important perks and what are the lesser important perks. So when we start to discuss the base traits of the captains and which are important and which are less important, you have to understand that there are basically 2 ways to set up a destroyer. We call it either a torp boat or a gunboat. The difference is the torpedo boat focused setup is based on maximizing the concealment of the destroyer. So the idea is that you are not visible to the enemy team, because you can almost, or let's say you have a very low concealment. That means the enemy has to be very close to you to spot you. So you need to have inspirations which reduce your concealment. And the captain number 1 is Erich Bay, who gives you, if he's maxed, a base trait of 5% reduction of concealment. The next captain is Mr. Swirsky. Mr. Swirsky comes with the Pan-Asian destroyer. You have to purchase him. So for a newer player, he's probably not available immediately. That's why I'm not talking about him right now. And then there is the Pan-Asian destroyer captain, which offers you a 3% improved concealment, but combined with a 3% improved torpedo damage. And personally, I think this captain is even to be favored over Swirsky. Only for Pan-Asians you would use Swirsky anyway in a triple concealment build. But I started to switch the 4% concealment of Swirsky versus the Pan-Asian captain with 3%, but I get 3% more damage on torpedoes. And this really worked well for me. So those are the three most important torpedo concealment build captains you would level up if you want to run a torpedo concealment build. So having said that, Mr. Bay and Mr. Sims are probably the most widely used inspirations for destroyers. And you would always vary one of or both of them with another inspiration or use them in direct combination. So a lot of DDs are run in Sims Bay combination or in a double concealment build like I just introduced that. And then only some gunboats you would use some gun reload focused captain together with Sims. Rarely or sometimes you combine them with Bay, but rarely you don't use any of the two. So those two are the ones, Bay and Sims are the ones I suggest to level up as much as possible as soon as possible, because that's a good start for you. And then you need to look at the nation you want to level up, and I go through the nations right now. To help you understand how this system works, it's basically pretty simple. Every nation usually has two destroyer dedicated captains. You can recognize them with their symbol, which is the arrow to the right. And these differ in two ways. One usually is the torpedo focused captain, which focus on concealment, fast torpedo reload, speed of the destroyer. And the other is the so-called gunboat captain. The gunboat captain usually focus on faster gun reloads, on turret traverse, on additional hit points, on longer smoke duration. So you always have a variation. And then you have the generic captain. The generic captain can be used on any ship class and has some perks for every class. In my opinion, for some destroyers, the generic captain is also very attractive. Unfortunately, many players disregard the generic captain for destroyers as being not useful. But in my opinion, they have some very valuable perks. The first is the 2% increased fire chance, especially for American gunboats. Mr. Dewey is very usable because American gunboats usually have 5% fire chance. And with Mr. Dewey, you can increase them to 7%, which is pretty huge. And then you have some other perks like turret traverse or speed. So you might want to try out the generic captains on some destroyers, but I will tell you in some other videos about specific configurations and what I suggest you to use. For now, understand there's two destroyer captains, one for gunboats and one for torpedo boats. So when we talk about the American destroyers, I recommend you Halsey for the gunboats, obviously. And as I said earlier, I use Dewey on a couple of destroyers because Dewey has not only 2% increased fire chance, but the legendary perk will give you a third consumable, which means the American destroyer have a very long last smoke, longer than 2 minutes, and you get a third 2 minutes 30 smoke. So that means instead of maybe total 5 minutes of smoke, you will have 7.5 minutes smoke with this guy, and this is very interesting for the gunboats. If you like to start with torpedo boats, then the Japanese destroyers are pretty much recommended because they focus on torpedoes, and you will want to have Tanaka because he's the torpedo captain, and you need to level him up. He increases your torpedo damage and focused on speed and concealment and so on. So he's very good. You don't need Kurita in the first instance. He's something for the later game. If you play one of the few gunboats like Akisuki, you want to have Kurita on that ship. But with Tanaka, you're good to go for, let's say, the first 6 months of the game. You can focus on him, forget about Kurita for the start. With the British destroyers, you would want to go with Tirvet. Because Tirvet has a very interesting legendary perk, which gives you additional smoke and a faster smoke reload, basically enabling you to have about 8 minutes permanent smoke. The generator takes less time and the smoke lasts less, but you have permanent smoke, and so this is very useful if you want to play around with the British smoke. For the Germans, it's similar to the Japanese. You want to go with Van Spee for the torpedo configuration, or with Bay for the gunboat configuration. German destroyers are a bit of both. You can play them either as torpedo boat or as a gunboat. Every destroyer is a little bit different. Some are more a torpedo boat, some are more a gunboat. But you will learn that once you level up the lines. Anyway, you start with Bay for the concealment reason, but don't forget Van Spee. I have had very great success with Van Spee, for example, in the T-61 or ships like those. The French destroyers basically need only Aubeneau. You don't need the other captain. Aubeneau has one big base trait. It's a 5% increase of HE damage, which is pretty useful for some destroyers. And also it does offer the speed concealment, but this is more something for the pro player. So if you're more advanced, I wouldn't use that in the beginning, which is the perk in the second row to the rightmost. In the beginning, I would use the middle one or the left one on that row. The rightmost one is more if you know what to do in a destroyer. But Aubeneau is the French captain you should be using. The same goes for the Russian nation. If you focus on the Russian nation, you basically only in the beginning need Trubetskoy. He has also a valuable base trait reducing incoming damage by 8%, which you can use as an inspiration on some other gunboats as well. Also quite valuable inspiration. You can also work with von Essen here, which is the generic captain. Again, he offers the perk to increase the fire chance by 2% and offers a third concealment. Very valuable on some of the Russian destroyers. But for the beginning, go with Trubetskoy, and if you have enough resources later on, try von Essen as an alternative and play around with the configurations and see which style you prefer, if you prefer the hybrid or the torpedo or the gunboat build. Let's continue with the Italian line, though I don't recommend to grind the Italian destroyers from scratch. They are a later line. If you have the major lines like the American, the Japanese, the French, I would consider those the major lines, the Germans. But I wouldn't use the Russians and the Italians and the Pan-Asians for start, because they're more specialized. The Italians are very much focused on usage of rolling smoke, and that's why I would use Fulgosi, because it extends the rolling smoke, and you have ships you YOLO most of the time. So this is a very special style to play. I wouldn't use this from start, but just so you know about these captains, they exist. I would focus on Fulgosi, in my opinion, and later on the gunboat captain. And then for the Pan-Asian, about Shishang, I mentioned him in the start. So he's for me, he's the second most important captain right now in the current meta, after Bay instead of Swirsky. So he's top priority to level up. And then we have the gunboat captain from the Pan-Asians. But again, I wouldn't focus on the Pan-Asian destroyers from start because they're a bit special to play. They have deep water torpedoes. They can't hit destroyers. So they're pretty specialized. So to summarize, go for Sims, go for Bay, go for the Pan-Asian concealment captain in the beginning, and you have a good starting point. Focus on either torpedo boats from the Japanese or the American gunboats to kick off. You might focus on the Germans. The French are more special for later, for mid, let's say, start before you go to the Italian and Pan-Asians if you're good at destroyers. If you're still listening to this tutorial, we have come to an end for this first chapter of Introduction into Destroyer Play, focused on commanders. The next one will be a basic introduction into the gameplay, into the map layout, into basic things, and then we will work our way through till the high-end game with radar, with citadelling, and blah blah blah, and aiming and all this stuff. So looking forward. If you follow me, leave your comments, hit your thumbs up. I appreciate any comment about this and what you expect from future tutorials, and looking forward to see you out there. Bye bye and enjoy.